It is amazing to me, said Bingley, how young ladies can have patience to be so very accomplished as they all are. All young ladies accomplished? My dear Charles, what do you mean? Yes, all of them, I think. They all paint tables, cover screens and net purses. I scarcely know anyone who cannot do all this, and I'm sure I never heard a young lady spoken of for the first time without being informed that she was very accomplished. Your list of the common extent of accomplishments, said Darcy, has too much truth. The word is applied to many a woman who deserves it no otherwise than by netting a purse or covering a screen. But I am very far from agreeing with you in your estimation of ladies in general. I cannot boast of knowing more than half a dozen in the whole range of my acquaintance that are really accomplished. Nor I, to be sure, said Miss Bingley. Then, observed Elizabeth, you must comprehend a great deal in your idea of an accomplished woman. Yes, I do comprehend a great deal in it. Oh, certainly, cried his faithful assistant. No one can be really esteemed accomplished who does not greatly surpass what is usually met with. A woman must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages to deserve the word. And besides all this, she must possess a certain something in her air and manner of walking, the tone of her voice, her address and expressions, or the word will be but half deserved. All this she must possess, said Darcy. And to all this she must yet add something more substantial, in the improvement of her mind by extensive reading. I am no longer surprised at your knowing only 6 accomplished women. I rather wonder now at your knowing any. So the accomplished woman chapter in Pride and Prejudice is one that has been like whirring around my brain for quite a few years. It's one that I am fascinated by. I feel like I've always been somewhat fascinated by like the history of education and what is valued in different societies over history. It's one of the reasons that I find the Tudor period particularly an interesting one, because there are like a couple of decades there where it was deemed fashionable, at least in noble families, to educate your daughters, where suddenly it was deemed fashionable for women to know Latin and different languages and theology and all sorts of different things, because it was deemed important to have a woman who could kind of hold her own in a conversation with men. And that was something that was just fashionable for a couple of decades there and then kind of fell out of fashion and wasn't really seen again for a couple more centuries. I think maybe I'm also slightly interested in it because I went to a fairly academically competitive secondary school where the goal was really like, you will go to university. Like, it's up to you, you cannot go to university if you don't want to, but just know if you don't go to university then we will not acknowledge you and you'll really mess with our website statistics, so please go to university. And I remember when I was at school that I had quite a few friends who really obsessed about, you know, the kind of things that you had to do to impress universities. I'd often hear people talking about all of the things that they were trying to do to make their UCAS application stand out and all of the extracurriculars that you apparently had to do. People talking about how you had to like get all A stars at GCSE and A level, that you had to have a grade 8 in at least 2 different instruments, that you had to play a sport, get your Duke of Edinburgh award, do Young Enterprise, you had to have a part-time job, know multiple languages, be a prefect, and at the end of all of these conversations I'd always just want to sob, and I would always just kind of feel like, oh, I'm never gonna get into university! So when I read Pride and Prejudice for the first time, I remember just kind of being like, but also being kind of impressed by Elizabeth and how nonchalant she is in this conversation with the Bingleys and Mr. Darcy, how she hears Miss Bingley and Mr. Darcy listing off all of the accomplishments that women must have, and she's kind of like, that sounds kind of dumb and kind of impossible, so, you know, you do you, boo, and I'm gonna get on with enjoying my life, thanks. But yeah, this chapter has really, really stuck in my head, and I feel like it's quite a popular one for a lot of people who love Pride and Prejudice. So with this in mind, I thought I'd kind of make a tag out of this chapter, taking that list of accomplishments that Miss Bingley and Mr. Darcy use and kind of bringing out a bookish prompt to suit them. And I want to make very, very clear that you do not have to identify as a woman in order to do this tag. If you love Pride and Prejudice, then I want to hear your answers, because I know that there are a bunch of Jane Austen nerds out there, not just me. So let's get into the questions. So the first thing that Miss Bingley announces that a woman must have a thorough knowledge in order to be considered accomplished is music. And with that in mind, the first prompt is favourite literary musician. So tell me about your favourite musician who appears in a book. They can be fictional, they can be real, I don't really mind, just as long as they appear in a book. And for this I chose Hans Huberman from The Book Thief. Hans Huberman is the main character Liesel's adoptive father and he plays the accordion. We actually learn later on in the book how it was that he learnt to play the accordion, and it really plays a massive part in the story. And he is not a fantastic player by any means, he is not the most technical player, but he is just such a compassionate, charming man that he brings delight and joy to anybody who hears him play. There are some fantastic scenes where the residents of Himmel Street, where this book takes place, are sat in a bomb shelter and Hans is playing for them and just entertaining everybody, and it's just the most lovely, comforting thing to read. Hans Huberman just generally is my favourite character in The Book Thief, and so I had to give this to him. Question number 2, the next accomplishment that Caroline Bingley declares that a woman must have is the ability to sing well. And for that I have asked for a poetry recommendation from you. There are quite a few poetry collections that I always make reference to, so I wanted to pick something a little bit different for this that I've not given quite as much airtime to. So with that in mind, I have Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth by Warsan, Shire. This is a slimline volume of poetry which just has haunting poems about war and what it means to be a woman in a war-torn country. As you can imagine, it is not a very easy read. There is a lot of self-discussion on trauma and violence, so just be aware of that before you pick this up, but it is a stunning volume of poetry. I really highly recommend it. Question number 3, the next accomplishment a woman must have is drawing. So with this in mind, I have asked for you to show me a beautiful cover design. I've done quite a few videos where I've talked about the most beautiful book covers on my shelves. I'll leave a little list of them below, but I have to say, I think the most stunning book design on my shelf has to go to this. This is a fairy tale collection. This is Tales of the Marvellous and News of the Strange, which is a collection of medieval Arab stories. Just look at that, it's so pretty, and the end paper is stunning too, and I like it a lot. Accomplishment number 4 is dancing, or dancing. I'm from up north, so we say dancing. And this was a little bit of a harder one to think of a prompt for, but I eventually came round to a book with a lively plot. Now, I am not somebody who particularly reads like action-packed adventure stories, so this was a little bit of a harder book to pin down. However, the answer I eventually came up with was The Odyssey by Homer, which really is just one of the oldest adventure stories. I mean, there is just so much that goes on in this book. We've got gods and goddesses, we've got cyclops, we've got sea monsters, we've got nymphs, we've got sirens, just a lot going on packed into this book. There's just action and adventure happening in almost every chapter, so I had to go for this one. I love this very much. I particularly, as I've said before, love this translation by Emily Wilson. Accomplishment number 5 is a thorough knowledge of modern languages. So with this in mind, I am asking you to find your favourite piece of translated fiction. It can be a classic or a more modern piece of translated fiction, just anything that was not originally published in English, or indeed whatever language is your first. And for this, I went for Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. I know this got a lot of buzz and attention like a year or two ago, and I am here back singing its praises because I think this is a fantastic book. This tells the story of Kiko, who has been working in a Japanese convenience store for the past like 15-20 years, and all of her friends and family are concerned that she has not moved on with her life. But Kiko enjoys working at the convenience store. It really suits her way of living and her routine, and she finds a lot of comfort in the routine of the store. It's a lot about peer pressure and societal obligation, and you having to try and fight against societal expectations to live a life that is fulfilling to you. It is a short little thing, but it really does pack a punch, and I can totally see why so many people love this. And weirdly, I found a lot of myself in some of the things that Kiko did, which I did not know if I should be concerned about or not. Question number 6, we are venturing away from the more tangible accomplishments, more going into personality that an accomplished woman should have, and we have something in her air and manner of walking. For this, I am asking you to pick a book with a strong atmosphere, and I feel like my typical answer for this is the one that I'm going to go back to. It is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Because when I think of this book, I think atmosphere. I feel like the first thing that anybody who has read this trilogy of books will tell you is that they strongly evoke the atmosphere and the time period of Tudor England. Whether you physically read this or listen to the audiobook, you will just find yourself completely immersed in the world of Tudor England. Like, it is quite startling. Hilary Mantel is just so skilled at getting you right into the mindset of this time period, but without getting too mired down with unnecessary details that you don't need. It's just beautifully done, and I'm still angry about the whole Booker situation. Don't talk to me about it. Question number 7 is the tone of her voice, her address and expressions. Getting across the idea that an accomplished woman is one who is particularly eloquent. One that I could not fulfill. So for this, I am asking for a book that you think has beautiful writing. And after doing my Victober video the other day, I was really reminded about how stunning and beautiful the writing in The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde really is. If you haven't read The Picture of Dorian Gray before, I would really highly recommend that you, at the very least, like, have a look on Google Books and read like the first couple of pages of this, and I dare you, to not be completely entranced. Because this book really is all about beauty and the lengths that we will go to acquire eternal beauty. So of course, beautiful writing must be expected in this book. Yeah, it's just gorgeous, and I definitely need to do a reread, which is what I say about every classic that I read. And the final criteria for an accomplished woman, which is given to us by Mr. Darcy, is the improvement of her mind by extensive reading. So with this in mind, I would like to ask, what is your next read? So for me, I have a few books on my TBR that are requiring my attention, but the one that is probably calling the most to me that I probably should get round to next is The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. Particularly because Kieran from KD Books and Grace from GK Reads are currently hosting a read-along in October of The Little Friend. So I have the book, the read-along is going on, so I really should try and read this month. The main thing that is putting me off this is how tiny the writing is. Ugh. I really love The Secret History. It is one of my favourite books. The Goldfinch I found just kind of so-so, so I'm very interested in seeing how this final work of Donna Tartt will hit for me. Final question of this tag is more just a nosy little question, which is, do you think that you would be considered accomplished in the Regency time period? Looking at the long list of criteria that Miss Bingley and Mr. Darcy list, do you think you would be considered accomplished? And the more I read it, the more I'm like, no. I definitely have the reading thing down. I think I'm a decent singer, and I can play the piano, but not that well. The less said about my piano playing, the better. But I wouldn't consider myself to be a particularly artistic person. I have not drawn in many a year. Anybody who has ever done like musical theatre shows with me will attest that I am a terrible dancer. I did okay at languages at secondary school, you know, for exams, but I have completely lost that ability because I have not kept it up. And I don't think of myself as being like a particularly eloquent, charming person. So the whole thing about having something in her air and manner of walking, the tone of her voice, her address and expressions, I'm like, nope, not me, thanks, no. And home economics was not a thing when I went to school, so I'm not really very good at sewing or doing embroidery or anything like that. I mean, I'm pretty confident I can sew a button on, and I could probably darn a sock if I was asked to, but it's not really something that I would say I'm skilled at. So no, I don't think I would be considered really the most accomplished woman in Regency England. Though, I will say, I'm pretty good at following rules, so I feel like if that was the expectation on me, I probably would be quite good at fulfilling it. Like, I'm a bit of a goody-goody. Like, if you tell me it's important to learn something, I will probably learn it. So yes, this is my fun little original tag based around Pride and Prejudice. I hope you enjoyed it. I will leave people tagged below to do this, but if you have done this and you love Pride and Prejudice and you want to answer the questions, then by all means feel free and say that I tagged you. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found this tag fun. I hope you're all having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.